welcome to another episode of You Can't Spell Horror Without HR. I'm your host, Chris Timol.
And I am Brianna Grimes.
Grimes, what is happening today?
It is a beautiful, finally cold, somewhat fall winter day here in Texas, and I am enjoying the weather, sir. How about you?
You know what? It is 68 degrees and sunny here in sunny Sarasota, Florida. So it is absolutely spectacular. I am talking to you from outside of my back patio. So I'm super excited to talk about our topics today. I hope you're ready.
Love it. I'm always ready. As born ready.
So our topics today, dear listener, we're going to be talking about assessments. Companies have different assessments, whether they be, we'll talk specifically about 360s and Myers Briggs today, but there are plenty of them out there. And I've got some horror stories to share with you. The first one, we call it the 360 trap. Now, friend Sarah Chen had been marketing director at a company called Tech Vision Solutions for 5 years. She's consistently receiving strong performance reviews and leading several successful product launches. Now, her team's campaigns had helped grow the company's market share by 23% in the past 2 years alone. However, everything changed when Marcus Reynolds, the new chief marketing officer, joined the company. From their first interaction, it was clear that Marcus and Sarah had different visions for the marketing department. While Sarah advocated for data-driven, customer-centric campaigns, Marcus pushed more for more aggressive, sales-focused approaches. Despite the tension, Sarah maintained her professionalism and continued delivering results. Now, 3 months after Marcus's arrival, he announced a department-wide 360-degree feedback initiative, supposedly to align the team dynamics with the company's new direction. The review was announced with really short notice, and Sarah noticed that unlike in previous years, the feedback providers weren't randomly selected. Instead, that doesn't feel good. Instead, Marcus personally handpicked who would provide feedback for each manager. Even the questions seemed carefully crafted, focusing heavily on leadership style rather than concrete achievements. For Sarah's 360, Marcus selected 2 recently hired employees who reported directly to him, 3 people from the sales team who had openly opposed Sarah's data-driven approach, and a client who had previously pushed back on Sarah's strict compliance policies. Most tellingly, he only included 1 member of Sarah's direct team of 8 people, conveniently excluding those who had worked closely with her during the company's most successful campaigns. The resulting feedback painted, as you can imagine, a deeply skewed picture. Comments focused heavily on resistance to change, using air quotes, and inflexibility, while positive feedback from Sarah's long-term team members was notably absent. The assessment emphasized traditional marketing weaknesses, again in air quotes, while ignoring the digital success metrics that had driven the company's recent growth. Most of the criticisms centered on personality rather than performance, using phrases like stubborn adherence to data and unwillingness to embrace aggressive strategies. Marcus used this carefully orchestrated feedback to put Sarah on a PIP, performance improvement plan. The PIP's requirements seemed designed to dismantle what had been her successful approach. Things like mandatory changes to her proven marketing strategies, revised decision-making processes requiring Marcus's approval for even minor decisions, and weekly check-ins that increasingly felt like interrogations about her leadership style adjustments. Sarah began, of course, documenting everything. She saved emails about reviewer selection, noted the timing of the review versus company policy, and kept meticulous records of her team's actual performance metrics. In meetings with Marcus, she took detailed notes, and afterwards she would follow up with emails confirming what was discussed, creating a paper trail of his increasingly unreasonable demands. So I'll stop there, right? I mean, we could go on. She goes to HR. Seems like Marcus had used similar tactics with 2 other senior managers that he'd wanted to replace. There was a whole investigation, and it resulted in the company suspending 360 reviews, and then actually Marcus leaving and her getting the job, etc. So, your thoughts on 360s and this story and how they can be used and misused?
I love that we're talking about this because I do feel like it's really not talked about enough. And I feel like sometimes 360 reviews and just a really good overall feedback process seems to be something just out of reach for small companies. They just assume they're very expensive and meticulous and time consuming, and they don't really see the value in them. But then on the other end of the scale, larger companies can easily do them incorrectly, and then they gain no value from the investment in doing these types of processes. But yeah, there's definitely a lot wrong with this particular situation. One of the first things I noticed that I think you said that Sarah had noticed that in previous years, it was done randomly. And honestly, 360 reviews is not necessarily something that should be done annually. Like annual reviews and 360 reviews are a little bit different. 360 reviews are really purposed more with development. Like when you are getting ready to develop a leader or a frontline employee to that next level, that's when you really want the 360 review. You want to get a good understanding of how they interact with their peers, how they interact with their direct reports if they have them, and then how the executives or the senior leaders perceive this person. What is their reputation? Because behind closed doors, is there a champion that is going to champion for this person from a developmental standpoint? Have they really kind of set themselves apart in the organization that way? So 360s are really meant more for development, in the sense that they're not really supposed to replace annual reviews. Annual reviews are really just meant to look at what is that person doing, what are their accomplishments, what are their areas of opportunity. It's a place for the manager and the direct report to really develop that relationship of that continuous feedback. Annual review should never be a surprise, because hopefully if you've got a good manager, they're giving you feedback all throughout the year. But that was one of the first things I recognized here, is just kind of overall, this company really wasn't doing 360 reviews with the intended purpose of what 360s are really meant to do for a person and for an organization.
It was obviously used as a weapon, right? This guy comes in and he's like, you know what? I don't like this lady. I got these other 2 people I don't like. You know what? Let me manufacture, right? They may be doing great, but I don't like them and I don't want them on my team. And so, how can I get rid of them? Let's do a 360. I will, laser point. I want this person doesn't like her. This person doesn't like her. Like, so, so I'll get a really bad 360 result. I know the result I'm going to get, and I can use it against the person.
Yeah.
I hate that.
And that's the easiest way to weaponize really anything. If you look at just HR broadly, easiest way for managers or leaders to weaponize anything is to use it in a way it was not intended, and that's why strict adherence to understanding and having conversations around the purpose of certain things in your organization from an HR standpoint is critical, because it allows, or it ensures that the weaponization is less likely to happen, because you have parameters around what is this used for, who can use it, and how is it supposed to be used. Because if this company had a clearly defined one for each, this manager would have never been able to weaponize it against Sarah, because the 360s would have only been for development. So there's no way he could have chose just like random people to provide that feedback. The other thing I noticed too is I'm not a huge fan of having clients provide feedback for 360 reviews. Clients there's so much conflict of interest there, especially if they're an account manager or sales position. There's so much potential for, you rub my back, I'll rub yours type of thing. And it's one of those situations where I don't think a client should ever be part of the review process. Absolutely go to your clients, get service feedback, service surveys, NPS scores, all that kind of stuff is very important to running a business. But as far as like an employee's development or 360 review, I'm really like not a huge fan of clients being any part of that internal process.
Yeah. No, that I thought that was odd as well. I mean, in my experience, the reviewee should have some sort of, or I guess in my experience, the reviewees always had the ability to choose people who he or she wants to review them, right? Like, so,
Yeah.
in my past, it's because, like you said, it's always been part of like a developmental thing. Like I'm taking a course, I'm taking a leadership course, and okay, we want to do internally in our organization. Let's do a 360. So who do you want to pick? Okay, so obviously I'll review myself, my manager, and a couple of people on my team, and then a couple of other folks that I work with. And personally, I would pick people who I thought I had a good relationship with, and I would absolutely pick people who I know I didn't have a spectacular relationship with, and so you can get that feedback. Like, to me, so what are your thoughts on that? Right, giving the agency to the reviewee to choose their reviewers.
Yeah, I think it more so needs to be a partnership between the reviewee and the manager, right? Like ultimately the manager and the employee both have to be on the same page that a 360, like this is the time to do it for whatever reason. And so I think it needs to be a conversation. Hey, these are the people that I want feedback from, but I think that it's important for the manager to also be the person if the employer, the reviewee, is not choosing people that are going to challenge them or going to give them feedback that they need to be aware of and they need to hear. That's where the manager, I think, needs to come in and say, hey, I think we should include XYZ. So I think both of them kind of need to put a list together and then like kind of go through that list and then finalize who those people are. But I think it's definitely something that is really important to have that conversation. And again, a 360 being part of that development process is having a relationship with your manager who is developing you and is basically looking for a broader village to help develop you. Because your direct manager will only ever be able to develop you so far. And outside of that, you're going to look to mentors, you're going to look to more senior level executives. And that's really where that 360 kind of starts that process. Sometimes a 360 is a trigger for a mentorship relationship. There's someone out of the 360 that says, hey, if this person's looking to develop, I'd love to mentor this person. Sometimes those mentorship relationships come before the 360, and the feedback, is, again, not a surprise from some of the people that are part of it. But I do think that it needs to be kind of a conversation and more of a partnership than just giving sole agency to the reviewee to kind of pick their own, and the manager just facilitate it.
All right, that's cool. That's fair. Let's move on to our next story, which I like a lot because this one is called typecast, when personality becomes policy. I should say that the stories that we're telling you are completely fictional. They are made up. They are not any of our clients or anything that has happened to us specifically or that we've seen. These are all fictionalized accounts of stories that we have sourced from the internet. This story is near and dear to my heart. It's typecast, when personality becomes policy. Jack Morrison and Linda Hayes had followed nearly identical paths to the C-suite at Apex Industries. Both rose through operations, prided themselves on efficiency, and shared an unwavering commitment to structure and process. When they discovered they were both ESTJs during executive retreat, their shared Myers Briggs type indicator became more than just a personality indicator. It became a blueprint for what they considered executive material. It makes perfect sense, Jack told Linda over drinks after the retreat. We're natural leaders, decisive, organized. Look at our track records, Linda nodded enthusiastically. That's why we've been so successful. We speak the same language, make decisions the same way. Imagine if our whole leadership team operated like this. What started as a casual conversation evolved into kind of an informal hiring policy. When positions opened up on their respective leadership teams, MBTI assessments became a crucial part of the selection process. Though never officially documented, the message was clear. ESTJs were preferred, while other types were suspect. The impact rippled through the organization quickly. Sarah Martinez, a highly successful project development director and INTP, noticed the shift during executive meetings. Her analytical and innovation-focused contributions were increasingly met with subtle dismissals. That's an interesting perspective, Sarah, Jack would say, exchanging knowing looks with Linda. Very creative, but let's focus on practical solutions. The microaggressions slowly became more overt. During a strategic planning session, Sarah overheard Linda stage whispered to another executive, well, you know how INTPs are, always lost in theoretical clouds instead of focusing on execution. The comment stung, but the resulting laughter from others hurt more. Tom Chen, an ENFJ marketing VP, found himself increasingly isolated despite his department's strong performance. It's no wonder you want to spend so much time on team engagement, Jack commented during a budget review. Classic ENFJ, always prioritizing feelings over fact. But in this organization, we need to focus on measurable outcomes. The toxicity trickled downward. Middle managers, noting which personalities were favored at the top, began mimicking the behavior. Rachel Cooper, a director under Linda, started requiring her team to display their MBTI types in their email signatures and Slack profiles. During team meetings, she'd make pointed comments like, this project needs an ESTJ's touch, or let's just have an ESTJ look at that proposal before we move forward. The transformation was insidious. High-performing employees who didn't fit the preferred type, doing air quotes, found themselves passed over for promotions or excluded from key projects. Some departments began informally screening job candidates using MBTI. Despite HR policies against such practices, I got to throw that out there, team members started prefacing their ideas with disclaimers about their type, either apologizing for not being an ESTJ or proudly declaring their ESTJ status. The damage became apparent in the company's innovation metrics at first. New product development slowed as creative voices were silenced. Employee engagement scores plummeted, particularly in departments directly under Jack and Linda. Exit interviews revealed a pattern. Talented individuals were leaving because they felt their personalities, not their performances, determined their value and their upward movement in the organization. The breaking point came during a town hall meeting when Jack proudly declared that 8 of the 10 newest executives were ESTJs. It shows we're building a leadership team that knows how to get things done, he announced, seemingly oblivious to the uncomfortable silence that followed. I will pause there for comment. I mean, talk about weaponization.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of stuff and that extreme is so dangerous. I mean, regardless of what you call it, any labels that we give any person ever is dangerous, right? Because it always becomes an us versus them mentality, and it just creates division. And, we've talked so much about culture and how a company really needs to create an inclusive culture where everyone has value and they feel their value and they have a place that, their particular skills and talents can be brought and contribute to the organization. And this is literally the complete opposite of that. Polar opposite. And if you've never read it, I highly recommend anyone listening to read this embargo prison study. When I was I did my undergrad in psychology, and I had a very particular dislike of personality assessments just in general. I just have never liked them. And after studying them in psychology, I could take any personality assessment and I could make whatever answer I wanted, whatever type I wanted. I would know exactly how to answer the questions in order to get that type. They are hackable, so to speak. But in my psychology courses, we studied this embargo prison study, and it was actually a collegiate study that was done in a psychology department where they assigned college students roles as either wardens or prisoners in a simulated prison environment, right? And they actually had to stop the study early because people had bought into the labels so dedicatedly, like they were so psychologically embedded into their roles as whether they were, the prison wardens or the prison, security or the prisoners themselves, that they started treating each other so inhumanely, even though they were college students. I mean, neither of them had committed a crime. No one had been trained as, police officers, or anything like that. Like, they had to stop the study early because people were so bought into these roles after such a short period of time of them being assigned these statuses that literally were made up. I mean, none of it was founded in anything. And this is exactly what this situation reminds me of, is we're giving these people these labels, and these labels are either positive or negative in such a psychological way that people buy into the groupthink. They buy into the, I'm better than you because I have these 4 letters, and you're not as good as me because you have those 4 letters. And it just becomes so polarizing, and it's such a dangerous slippery slope because we as humans, unfortunately, are very subject to this type of thing. Like, I mean, just the way our brains are wired. And so it's very difficult to be intentional and overcome that type of groupthink and that type of just really dangerous prejudicial thinking, even with labels that aren't commonplace labels. Like, if these were not labels that are your personality type is not covered under Title VII. However, they can be associated with things that are covered under Title VII. So it doesn't matter what label you give it. Any labeling or groupings of any particular person and giving them status is just a dangerous path to go on, regardless of how you sell it or what you call it.
So there's a lot to unpack with what you just said. So first and foremost, I mean, you can see it, like you mentioned, kind of like our group thinks, like how we're designed. We're tribal, right? So as humans, we are tribal. Go to a football match, whether it's soccer or actual football. Go to a baseball game. Talk to a Taylor Swift fan, right? I don't turn on your favorite news channel, around an election, and then flip to another channel around the election, and you'll see the other side is always bad. I mean, it is natural for people to kind of go to the reciprocal corners and come out, ready to fight or whatever. So you're right, giving labels. All these tests, they all do the same thing, right? They give labels to people. Some of these tools can be very valuable, whether it be MBTI or DISC or predictive index or Omnia or whatever. They can be very valuable. They can give you very valuable insights, right? Mm-hmm. The problem is that I find that the people that you give the tools to, they're not psychologists, right?
Yeah.
They're sales managers or operations managers. They don't know what they're doing. They're accountants, right? They don't know how to use the very delicate tool that we've given them, and so they're apt to, in many cases, misuse it. And as a business, like, you get yourself sued doing dumb stuff like that. And I've in my personal history, I've seen dumb stuff like this done, right? Yeah. I remember vividly that there was a sales manager at a company, and she was an ESTJ, and one of her sales reps was like an ENTP or something like that. And she was yelling at him in the office about how he had to divest himself of his P-ness, right? And and people, the heads coming up of the cubicle thing. Did you just say he should get rid of his P-ness? And she didn't say it that way.
Right.
So I mean, that's like the level of, we've given the nuclear codes to a monkey. What do you think is going to happen, right?
Yeah.
And then with that said, it's funny, like MBTI in particular, that's like one of those tests. Like, if you take it once, you get your results, right? It's like a horoscope, right?
Yeah.
Like, you pick up the paper, if they still do this anymore, they have the newspaper, they've got your horoscopes, and you read your horoscope, and you're like, yeah, that's me. That's totally me. Well, if you switch Pisces with Virgo, right, one day, and and the Virgo reads the Pisces and the Pisces read the Virgo, they're both going to be like, yeah, that's right. So it's just like this wacky, in general, it's a wacky pseudoscience, right? That Myers and Briggs, whoever, wrote a book to come up with something to sell, right?
Right.
That's number one. And I've personally hacked that test so many times. Yeah. I mean, I'm an ES. I think I hacked myself to like a strong ESTJ to a strong INFP and everything in between. It's not hard to do, right? And so, like, when what the person is looking for, you answer the questions that way, and then all of a sudden, all right, Chris is good again. He's no longer an ESTP or ENTP. He's now an ESTJ. So I will listen to Chris now.
Yeah, there's so many outside factors with these, and I'm not discounting. There is some value to be found in some of these assessments. They can be used as very helpful tools. I think it's hard to. They're not a foundation you want to build a business or a team off of. It's not something that I would put as a pillar of your organization. Like that's kind of just blanket statement here. I think part of me, these tests I think are a shortcut to getting to know someone, right? Like we'd rather have a little piece of paper spit out what this person is all about instead of taking the time to get to know them, build that relationship, and have a cycle of ongoing feedback, because that's hard, right? That's hard work. And in business, we're always looking at ways to cut costs. We're always looking at ways to be more efficient. But there are some ways, and we have found ways to be more efficient, but just because we can doesn't mean we should. And it kind of goes back to the old quote, I think Shakespeare actually, it's, to thine own self be true. If you know yourself, you know who you are, these personality tests are never going to change that. And for people that disagree and disagree on our position that it is pseudoscience, if any of you have ever taken a Harry Potter house sorting test and didn't like the house you were sorted in, you know what I'm talking about, because you will retake that test until you get the house you want.
We all know. We all know that Slytherin, like that is the house, right? Like Slytherin is the house to be in.
I don't know. I think there's definitely awesome parts to every house. I have taken the Harry Potter sorting 1,000 times in my lifetime. I was Gryffindor at one point. I was Hufflepuff. I've never been a Slytherin. So that is one that has never come out of the multitude of tests. But I think if I was going to if there was a bell curve for which one occurred the most, I'm pretty sure I'm a Ravenclaw. That one comes out the most. But, it's one of those things where if it's not consistent every single time, it does go against the scientific method in terms of you should see consistent results if something is proven. And because you can take these tests so many times and they can be impacted by your mental health that day, your physical health that day. Did you just get an alarming email or alarming phone call before you took this personality assessment? Are you stressed about the assessment? Are you even a good test taker? There are people that are just intimidated by tests in general, personality or otherwise. And that's just a part of who they are. It doesn't capture that well. And that's the hard part is not only, like we said, these tests are hackable, you can take them over and over again. They don't give you consistent results oftentimes. But they're so impacted by outside factors that are not encapsulated in the test that, you might learn and glean some information about that person from the test, but you're not getting the whole person. And it just ends up creating an image of this person or a perception of this person that you have that now over the course of the time you're working with them, they either have to prove to be true or they have to overcome your perception because you went in with this picture because a piece of paper told you this is who they were. So it can be an obstacle just as easily as it can be a tool.
It's quackery. I'm sorry. I just think it's quackery. So, all right. So dear listener, if you've stayed on with us for this long, this can be a problem for you. I took the liberty of doing a little bit of research. There's a company, Sorensen versus Mid-Atlantic Technologies in 2018. Background, the company implemented mandatory DISC assessments for all employees. They used the profile to restructure teams and determine promotions. High D profiles were given preference for leadership roles. Women and minorities were disproportionately classified as S, steady, and C, cautious types. And those profiles were then deemed unsuitable for leadership. Disparate impact under Title VII, ADA violations, using assessments to screen out individuals with anxiety and depression, privacy concerns regarding forced disclosure of personality traits, $4.3 million settlement. They were required to discontinue using DISC for promotion decisions, implement third-party oversight of assessment tools. That sounds like a business opportunity for us here at Puzzle. Provide back pay to affected employees and create new promotion criteria based on objective metrics. Here's another one. Wilson Group class action 2020. Sales organization required the SPQ Gold assessment, sales preference questionnaire, which I've used in the past. Used the results to determine territory assignments and commission structures. Older salespeople consistently received lower adaptability scores, and lower scores led to reduced territories and opportunities. I can totally see that happening. If you think this, so hold on, let me get up on this soapbox. So if you think that it's no big deal, it's just all fun and games, I don't know, I hope you got a handy couple $1 million in the bank, because these things have class action opportunities written all over them.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's definitely, I can tell that you're very passionate about this topic. You have some very strong, strong opinions about pseudosciences. Yeah, no, not at all. But I do agree with you in terms of there is a lot of legal compliance issues that people run into. And I think that, again, I just want to clarify, we're not saying don't use them, right? There is some value that they can be used if they're used properly, if they're used with oversight. Like, there is some good things that can come out of using the tools the way they're designed. I will say, however, that there is a lot of legal repercussions that can come into play here, especially if you're not paying attention to, again, the unintended consequences of solely relying on some of these personality assessments to make business decisions, right? And as business owners, we have to go back to, we typically make business decisions on facts and data. And while there is data that you can pull from these personality assessments, the data itself is only as good as the input. And the input can be so disparate based on where that person is in their day, in their life, in their hour, in their workday, in their employee relationship with you, that data is not giving you anything consistent. And so I think that's the key thing here is, we didn't, outside of what, you just said in terms of the different court cases, there are a lot of court cases out there, but the one commonality between all of them is that they solely relied on these personality tests for something, to make business decisions, for hiring decisions, to make, territory decisions. And I think it's a very rookie business mistake to base all of your decisions on one data set, and B, a data set that you have no ability to control the reliability of the inputs. So, definitely a lot of legal potholes there. Again, not saying don't ever use them. They're terrible, stay away. But you can't rely on them 100% either. This should not be the cornerstone on which you build your business.
I think that's, key. So let's talk about so what can businesses do to how can they protect themselves, still use these tools and get the good insight? Because I call it quackery, I call it pseudoscience 100%, but truthfully, there is good information that can be gleaned from a lot of these things. Honestly, I do really believe that, where organizations fall down and they don't really police it. So maybe we can talk about what organizations can do to protect themselves while using these tools, Grime.
Yeah. I think one of the main things to do if you are going to use any one of these tools, just as a protective blanket, is first and foremost documenting your process in terms of what you're using it for. Document the purpose behind this tool, who you're giving it to, why you're giving it to them, what it should impact in the business and what it shouldn't. I think that's going to be your clear delineation to make sure that you are not having any disparate impacts, violating Title VII, anything like that. And kind of speaking to an example, I know I really like Omnia. Kind of a selfless plug. I know we use it here at Puzzle. Omnia is a great tool, and I like how we use it because Omnia does a great job. And I'm not a huge fan of these assessments in general, but Omnia actually is probably one of my favorite because it shows how a person generally shows up to situations. It's not a personality assessment. It shows you what your default is, because everyone has a default, right? There are certain things that are just kind of, I'd say, resting personality traits for all of us. If you are an outgoing person, you're generally going to be probably the person to break silence the first time because you're uncomfortable with it, or you're going to be the first person to go up and introduce yourself. That's kind of your default setting. Mm-hmm. And so that's really what Omnia focuses on. And, when I was a supervisor, what I used it for is I really loved going through the Omnia with my employee and asking them questions about, do you feel like this is accurate? Like, how would you handle this situation? And it sparked some really good conversations between me and my employees, because a lot of the questions that I was trying to get at was, in the event of a situation where something goes wrong, you mess up, you make a mistake. How can I coach you? Like, what is the best way to handle it? Because not everybody handles feedback, the same. Some people like it direct, some people like it, a little bit more conversational. And so a lot of the Omnia assessment information that I was given as a supervisor, it was great because I used it to start those conversations that built the relationship. So it was the foundation of my relationship with the employee, not the foundation of my business decisions involving the employee. So it was great to have some of that insight and be able to have those conversations early in the relationship. So when that new employee did make a mistake or do something, I could go to them and have that conversation. And we've already kind of mutually agreed upon, this is how I'm going to respond. And this is how I learn best. And we have those conversations. So I think understanding the purpose of how you're going to use this tool, who is going to be able to have access to this tool, and allowing, honestly, what I did, and this is not something that, Puzzle did, this is something that I did specifically. I always told my employees, like, if there's anything on this report that you disagree with, go annotate it, scratch it out, and send it back to me. And that's the one that I will keep in your file, because you know yourself best, right? You've known yourself for 20, 30, 40 years, however long you've been alive. If there's something on here, because every assessment test obviously is fallible, right? If there's something on here that you're just like, that is not me, like that is not how I respond, I do not struggle with that, like, scratch it out, put a note in here, like, hey, don't talk to me that way, or don't respond to this situation that way. I will not respond well, because ultimately we know ourselves the best. So giving them that ability to also, like, say, yes, this is how my DISC assessment, Myers Briggs, Omnia, whatever came out, but here are the things I disagree with. I think if you allow that ability for the employee to really tell you about themselves instead of relying on that piece of paper and what was spit out by a computer, I think that's a really good way to also have the employee understand how it's going to be used, but also give the managers who are using it good practice in terms of understanding the information before they apply it to any level of, team engagement or culture building, or, any type of things like that they're going to be using it for.
So I'm going to synthesize what you just said. So number one, you have policies and procedures and document, right? Yep. So how you're going to use these things. Number two, and probably most importantly, train the users, train the leaders, train people so that they know how to use it. I will say, it is the Net Promoter Score. So the reviews that we get when we do, when we use Omnia with our customers, I mean, it's 10 out of 10. Everyone absolutely loves working with us in that tool. So clear policies, documented purposes, and then training.
Yeah.
And then the last thing you said was feedback. Get feedback from your employees, right? Make sure that they are picking up what you're putting down, right? That they're buying in, and allow the employee, the ability to say, no, that may say I'm a P, right? But in reality, that doesn't represent who I am. I'm going to self-select J in most instances, and I can be flexible.
Yeah.
So
I think that's a great summary in terms of, action items that clients can take, or, listeners can take. But I would say probably the rule of thumb would be, do not base any major business decisions on any of these personality assessments, because they are fallible, and they only give you a very, very small piece of the puzzle, so to speak, of your employee's personality. It is not a comprehensive, you're not the FBI receiving a file with a full, 10-year surveillance of a person. It is a 10-minute to 30-minute test, self-reported, and totally susceptible to outside factors. So just keep that in mind. If you choose to use it, assess how you're using it, and keep that in mind if you decide to use it in the future.
Amen. And around the same thing goes for 360s, by the way. It's the same sort of thing. Document, train, allow for feedback, and you'll be fine. Have you seen the new 360 software that you must have seen? 360 software that we built here at Puzzle.
I have. I'm super excited for it.
Yeah, that is kudos to the tech team for putting that together for us.
That's exciting stuff. Definitely making some progress in these areas for sure.
Thank you for hanging out with me again this week. And to our listeners, thanks for playing the HR Horror Story game. And join us next time for another episode of You Can't Spell Horror Without HR.
You have been listening to You Can't Spell Horror Without HR podcast, brought to you by PuzzleHR, Human Resources Solved. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to our channel to stay notified of new exciting episodes. To learn more about PuzzleHR, visit us at puzzlehr.com/podcast. Thank you for listening.